Ulli Appelbaum is the German dude who made brand strategy sound like neuroscience, because it kind of is. He's the founder of First the Trousers, Then the Shoes, a name that's weirdly perfect for a guy who believes strategy comes before style. He's the one who turned Red Baron into the Red Baroness, roasted liquid death, and proved Febreze works because we crave the smell of done. In short, Ulli doesn't build brands. He rewires your brain.
Multi-billion-dollar complex federal court litigation. We do it day in, day out. And we've built a team dedicated to doing nothing but keeping you safe in the most dangerous litigation in the world. We're comfortable where everybody else is horribly uncomfortable.
And with the litigation piece, we bring the compliance piece, right? That's what I'm adding. That's what my entire team is adding. We've built TCPA World only for you folks, to help you folks out.
And now, the Rabbi of ROAS, the man who makes ad tech repent in public and marketers rethink their life choices. The one, the only, Pesach Lattin.
I am Pesach Lattin. This is the ADOTAT Show. Today I'm joined by someone who knows how to strip branding down to its underwear before dressing it back up again. Ulli Appelbaum is the founder of First the Trousers and Then the Shoes, a name that's quirky, memorable, and a perfect metaphor for his philosophy. Strategy first, then execution. First of all, the best question of the day. How are you doing, Ulli?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show. Excited to be here.
So let's get right into it. You've staked your reputation on this idea that brands don't just stand for something, they operate like a neural network of meaning in people's heads. It's like saying Coke is less a drink and more of a slot machine of memories firing into the brain. What is the strangest, most non-obvious association you've engineered into a brand that actually moved market share?
So you're starting with a really tough question. So first of all, it's not me stating this, it's science stating this. That's what a brand is in the mind of consumers. And I've never been drunk enough while consulting my clients or developing strategies with my clients to come up with weird ideas. Maybe one breakthrough idea was a couple of years ago. I did some work for Red Baron, which is a frozen pizza here in the US. And we're really trying to break through. So part of many ideas we explored, and the one we eventually recommended.
Don't they have it? Isn't that like a German guy on the plane?
Yeah, it's a weird
What a
background.
coincidence.
It is, but it's a weird background story. And I'm not sure it has any heritage or connection with Germany or flying or anything like that. But we needed to jolt people out of their sort of like passive attitude towards the brand. So we turned the Red Baron into the Red Baroness. So the Red Baron became a female pilot that was basically the wing woman of moms out there. So it qualify as a weird idea. It was used for 2 years very well and very effectively in the market. CMO left. Company went back to the old Red Baron format. So that would qualify maybe as weird, but effective.
So when you say associations, are we talking about logos and jingles, the basic IKEA instruction manual, or full-blown identity frameworks where consumers basically adopt the brand into their personality?
I'm talking about everything that you associate and memorize about a specific brand, whether it's an experience, whether it's an emotion, whether it's the communication of the brand itself, whether it's what your neighbors tell you about the brand. All these things work together to create this network that, if it's coherent, if it's strong, really helps the brand. And the only criteria for this to really work, it needs to be associated to a slogan, or not so much a logo, but a brand assets and stuff like that. So it's really a much broader construct than just, the name, the logo, a claim, or something like that. So it's literally every memory you have about the brand that you think of, that you can recall when you think about the brand specifically.
So how do you prevent accidental, or let's just say negative associations? I'm thinking, this is just actually random and coincidence, I'm thinking Volkswagen and emission scandals. How do you prevent that?
Well, prevent it by not fucking up in the first place. That would be number one for me. And we always talk about brand authenticity, which is a word I absolutely detest, because when you think about it, what's the opposite of authenticity? It's, manipulative lying and faking it. And like, do you want a brand to be any of these things, which is what VW did with the emission problem? One thing you cannot control is the perception and the association consumers will create on their own with your brand, independently of what the brand does in terms of marketing activities or product development and these kind of things. But one way to mitigate that, in my opinion, is to be honest and sincere and straightforward and candid with what you're doing and what you're trying to do. So don't BS the consumer. That's a great way to avoid a negative association.
Do you know any examples where a bizarre association, let's say a smell, a ritual, an origin myth, beat a functional benefit hands down?
I would argue in every single case. I don't have a specific, well, no, there's one case about, let's say, a ritual and a smell, which was a campaign I mentioned in my first book for Febreze, the scent that you spray around in your house.
I use Febreze.
Okay.
Yeah, and I probably pay more money for the Febreze brand than I have to.
And you pay probably a premium. And they identified a few years back that people go through their cleaning ritual, right? They clean their whole house. And then the last touch is to spray Febreze, because the scent gives you a cue about, now my house is clean. If the house is clean and doesn't smell fresh, it doesn't really feel like clean. So here's a case where...
Yeah, or Fabuloso. That's the smell of my house.
Mine is wet dogs. Febreze couldn't help here either. So here's a case where you use a ritual scent cue to communicate a message, but that only works because this is based on consumer behavior and based on consumer practices. So you play it back to them, and that reinforces this association. Oh, I just cleaned my house. I should spray Febreze to make it smell fresh and clean. That would be an example of a, ritual-based, scent-based association. Another one is simply, Disney World pumping popcorn smell around their popcorn machines to get you to buy popcorn.
They really do that?
Apparently they do, yes.
Oh.
They used to do it. I don't know if they still do, but that's a proven method to get people to buy popcorn.
So how many associations can a consumer brain juggle before the brand turns into a cluttering kitchen drunk drawer?
Well, that's a good question too. There are several questions. I think one question is, how many association can a brand build at once? It's sort of like, what desired association can a brand build, which basically is the positioning. And there I would say the fewer the best, 2, 3, 4 at the most, because you got to spend money to build them, and that takes time and that takes effort. But what we also know is that for either long-established brands or brands that have a strong user base, the number of association is much richer than for new brands, for example. Why? Because, Mercedes has been in the market for hundreds of so years. The association network it has, based on everything it has done, based on all the experiences people have had with the brand, can be fairly big and fairly complex. If you are buying Febreze, so you will probably associate with Febreze way more association than someone who has never used Febreze and who thinks, oh, they provide a scent for the house type thing. You can, find way more memories you can associate with that brand. So it really depends a little bit. The trick for brands that have been in the market for a long time and that have rich and complex networks of association is coherence, right? They all need to work together. If they're too disparate and too random and not connected to each other, then you have like this slushy of association in your brain. I don't know what to do with that.
So multiple choice question here. Marketers screw up brand associations mostly because A, they chase social causes like magpies chasing shiny things. B, they slap on assets faster than consumers can process. C, they confuse purpose with product. D, all the above wrapped in jargon.
2 of those above. The second one I think you said was slap assets on everything.
Faster than consumers can process. Yeah.
Yes. Research shows that the more brand assets you build into your advertising and your communication, the stronger the memory recall of that brand will be. So that's like recent research that came out.
So more creative is better?
So more brand assets in your creative is better. There was research that was done recently with, I think, efficaces, which show that the ideal number of brand cues in your advertising is actually close to 7 in a 30-second TV ad, which is mind-blowing and very contrarian to what the industry has done for 50 years or so.
What are the 7 brand cues besides a logo?
Well,
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would take full credit for your meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
It can be the sound, an audio cue. It can be the color scheme.
Like a jingle or...
Jingle. It can be,
I still remember the NBC tone.
Yeah. Netflix.
The xylophone, I think it is.
Yes.
I don't even know do they still do it?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's stuck with me so much from watching late night TV that it's still that when I think of NBC, I think of a peacock and
Yeah.
a xylophone.
And that
Yeah.
is a beautiful example. Every time you hear this jingle, you probably think about NBC, and you probably think about what you thought about NBC, whether you liked it or not. All this comes together because you get exposed to that cue. So it can be, the shape of the product, the color of the product. It can be a character that is built into the communication. It can be all these different things. There are many different ways to create brand assets and tie them to your brand.
So what are these association levers that you talk about? You have 26 of them, I think?
So this was my first book, yes. This was basically, I looked at 1,200 plus case studies of effective marketing, and it was very unscientific. And every time I saw a new campaign that was effective, I looked at what's the source of association. And what I did is basically I stopped at 1,200 plus because I couldn't find any more than the 26 association. Now, we can argue, is it 25 or is it 28? But it's in that ballpark, basically. And the idea is really to use these associations and try to think, would that be a relevant association of my specific brand? So, for example, if you launch a water brand, you could say one of the source of association is country of origin. Would that be a way to position my brand? Another one could be consumer rituals that you brought up earlier. Could that be a way to position my brand? And what this allows you to do is to come up with all these hypotheses on how you can position your brand. Some of them will fall through because they're just not realistic or feasible or executionable, but then it will give you a number of options that is broad and significant, and that allows you then to select or validate the most relevant approach on how to position your brand, basically. So it's just a tool that allows you to accelerate your thought process when thinking about how do I position a brand.
So I was actually going to ask you about liquid water, about liquid death, which is just water.
Yep.
How did liquid death do it?
Okay, so liquid death is an interesting case, and I have mixed feelings about this. Everyone is claiming this is sort of like the
Yeah,
new
I
way
finally
of...
tried it, and it tasted like canned water.
That's exactly right.
I mean, there was nothing special about it. The source on it was like, it listed 3 different sources, and I know the guys that do this, and so they finally convinced me, you got to try this, and I tried it. I was like, it tastes like water in a can.
So liquid death for me is a brilliant creative communication idea because they really managed to break all the communication rules in the category. But the big weakness from my perspective is that liquid death doesn't have any true relevant association associated with the product itself.
Right.
And that ultimately will be the fall of liquid death, in my opinion. Now, another brand that also grew very successfully in parallel to liquid death is, I don't know if you're familiar with Poppy.
Oh, yes, I am. Yeah, the whole natural cola.
Correct, with apple cider content, which is good for your, prebiotics, which are good for your digestive system. The advertising, very millennial type thing, modern, contemporary, a bit generic, I would say.
I never saw an ad, so because I'm not.
No, you're not
50 years old. I'm not their target audience.
But what they do is they have a real product truth. So they have the acid, the apple vinegar that tastes great, and that's one of the mandate of the CEO to that brand before they were purchased. So they have something in the product that will keep you in the product and with the brand, which is the great taste. Liquid Death for me doesn't really have any proposition or anything unique about the product itself, and their claim that that's not how the marketing game is played today, I would disagree with that. I think if your product and the product experience doesn't provide anything special, your brand is going to die fairly quickly, or it's not going to survive.
I think of Liquid Death like a lot of those T-shirt companies that came up in the 2000s. They had really cool T-shirts.
Yeah.
Everyone went to the website, bought 1 or 2 cool T-shirts, and then never bought anything again.
Yeah.
So they made a bunch of money at the start. So all someone needs to do is create another, Coca-Cola could create a water brand that has identical or similar packaging. And what does Liquid Death have? Since they aren't, as you mentioned, there's no association besides they're cool.
And to be honest, I think what they're missing, I think with their exit strategy is to sell to a Pepsi and a Coke, right? I think that's their ultimate objective.
Well, like Poppy or those guys, yeah.
Not to build a brand for the next 200 years or something like that. I think that's what they're showing. And for me, a sign of weakness of a brand like Liquid Death is the speed at which they introduced. They started with still water, then sparkling water, now flavored teas.
Right.
and at a speed that shows me they don't do that because there's such a consumer demand. They do that to keep velocity at point of sale and try to
Right. The person
reserve.
tries one thing and tries a second,
That's exactly
tries a
right.
third.
And
But it's never going to become a long-term.
I agree. Now,
There's going to be no loyalty.
they would disagree with that. To give you an example, another brand that really differentiated itself through its personality for me was Southwest, the low-cost carrier airline. When they launched, they really differentiated. They weren't the first one, but they really differentiated themselves through their quirky personalities, in their safety announcement, in their advertising and stuff like that. But what most people tend to forget is that their core value proposition, low cost, was highly appealing to a big chunk of people. So there is something relevant there. Hey, I can fly and pay less for it. Of course, that's relevant for me. You give me a funny, quirky personality that makes me smile. That's going to, tip the balance towards you versus one of the other low-cost carriers. So that's for me an example where you have a strong value proposition for the core service you offer, which for me Liquid Dust doesn't. But then you have a personality that you use to differentiate yourself and create sort of like an emotional response from.
So moving on, you've said that when a team says, we can't do it, you're onto something. Walk me through the juiciest moment when fear in the boardroom turned into fuel and how you drag people from absolutely not to actually brilliant.
So fear in the boardroom. So this goes a bit against my consulting practice. And what I mean with that is I've never surprised a client with an idea that's going to scare the shit out of them. And the reason for that is because I work very closely with them and in a very structured way with them. So I never go away for like 4 weeks and then come back and say, ta-da, here we go.
But you had to have done it at least once, because everyone who says that they have this rule broke it originally. So which client did you scare the shit out of?
There was one, I moved to the US 20 years ago. One of the campaigns I worked on was a Purina campaign. And one of the brands within the Purina portfolio was...
and is that the dog food?
Yes, the dog food.
Okay, because I know there's Purina, the kids food, I think it's called. No, it's Farina, sorry.
But they also have
food. No wonder my children hate my cooking. Okay, so...
They must have good joints though, and a shiny fur if you feed them that. No, and we're really looking for a positioning, a way a hook to connect with that brand. One thing we came up with that we discovered at the time is that dog chow was used in a long-term longevity study about pets. So basically, it was used in a study that shows that feeding Purina at a specific feeding regimen extended the life of their pet by approximately 20% or something like that. So it was a scientific study that we were able to claim. So basically, you're able to play God, right? In a sense, you can say, I can prolong the life of your pet if you feed this brand at this regimen or at these quantities. Now, that was a really breakthrough and provocative idea. And we tried to prove, and we knew the client would react to that. And one of the objectives would also do to decrease the price sensitivity, basically add a premium to the price tag of this brand. And so the only way we could work there was the way the client was thinking, which was we did a quantitative survey before we presented the idea to show that this would prompt consumers to buy the brand at a higher price point. And then we shared the two together, idea and results. The client was not scared, but intrigued enough to basically replicate the research we did to validate. If an agency comes and says, we did some research and it showed that this is the coolest idea that you can work with, there's a bit of suspicion in there. So they basically revalidated it through their own research. But that worked because the client was data-driven and was open to listen to data-driven results to appreciate the quality of an idea.
How do you know it's product panic versus just a really bad idea?
That's a great question. I think that's 30 years of doing this day in, day out. I think when I evaluate a creative idea, the first thing I pay attention to is my gut's reaction. What is my emotional reaction to when I see an idea? But even reactions like, no, we can't do that. Has never been done before. Those are the reactions you're looking for. And then you can ask a series of strategic questions to make sure, does it satisfy a need? Or does it create an emotional response? And all these kind of things. But a little trick I've learned is when I see an idea on a tube, I look at it and assess it, but then go back to it and don't touch it, but then go back to it on Wednesday. And if I have that same reaction when I look at it the next day or 2 days later, then I know I'm onto something. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a good idea, but it means it has a very high potential to be a good idea that you just then need to validate. The Red Baroness I mentioned earlier in the introduction, when we saw this, we knew, oh my God, are we really going to present feminized logo to our client? And are we really going to use that to create interest in the brand? And the answer was yes. And the next day we had the same reaction, and then we went and presented it. So listen to your guts first. That's the single most important thing I would say. But to be honest, that only works if you have a lot of experience in the field. You know what I mean? If I show an idea to my wife, who is a lawyer, who doesn't do anything with marketing or brand building, her gut reaction is not going to be a benchmark for me to know this might be a really great idea. In fact, the benchmark here might be, the collective understanding or collective liking of something, but not the power of an idea per se. Does that make sense?
So moving on to brand purpose, something I like to call corporate aromatherapy. It always smells noble, but it cures nothing. So when have you seen brand purpose move revenue, market share, or loyalty? And when has it been the marketing equivalent of handing out free hugs in Times Square?
That's a great question. I think there's a complete overuse of purpose. And I'm a very cynical person, a very cynical attitude toward purpose. I think a purpose only makes sense if it's a genuine, expressing the genuine drive and desire of an organization. So one idea that comes to mind, which is always used as sort of like the gold standard, is Dove with the campaign for real beauty.
Right. People have authentic bodies, I think it was, correct?
Correct. But then, I'm cynical and I'm like, it brought the company a lot of new customers, a lot of profits, a lot of loyalty over 10, 15 years, however long this campaign has been running. How has it changed the attitude of women towards themselves? There is no evidence that shows that it actually had a purposeful impact on women, if that makes sense. For me, brands like Patagonia are genuinely purpose-driven companies because they will make sacrifices to live up to their values. That's a great way to see. I think it was Bernbach who said, your values are only, or your principles are only as much worth as you're willing to pay for them. So
do you think that's why tech founders wear so many Patagonia vests? Are they trying to take some of that value that they don't have?
That might be a way to make them look more authentic and more genuine. But then there's, for me, one of the greatest example of brand purpose-driven categories is ramen, Japanese ramen. Japanese ramen was created
We eat a lot of ramen in this house.
Yeah,
brown rice
here.
ramen. Yeah.
So we have this weird thing, right? So I can bring my kid a $15 ramen pot. They will not eat it. They want the 59 cents version.
The cheap
It's
stuff
absolutely
with
incredible.
all the MSG and
yeah, it's probably that's what they really like about it. But I forgot the name of this gentleman. He saw the starvation.
But that's everyone who goes to college eats ramen, though, right?
Yeah, but that's a money thing, right? But what you've seen in the last 10, 15 years is the premiumization of ramen, right? Now you have ramen restaurants, right, that are delicacies.
Well, you've always had ramen restaurants in Japan. I mean,
in Japan, but not in
Japan.
In the US.
It's actually can see the guys pull the
it's part
noodles
of the daily
and
nutrition.
everything. It's amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
If anyone's never seen real ramen made, it's amazing.
That's right. But that came about of this gentleman, I forgot his name, after World War II. He saw the famine in Japan and he said, wouldn't it be great to have a food product that is warm, that is easy to make, and that is filling? And that's how he started to experiment and ended up with the dried ramen, or how do you call that, dried... the ramen as we know it today. That is for me a real example of a brand purpose. The guy wanted to help his nation and turn that into a global phenomenon without realizing it. But then there's a lot of BS out there. As soon as you use...
Yeah, I think about pinkwashing. Like pinkwashing, I think now has a negative effect.
Yeah, I think there's also an evolution, right? 10 years ago, a purpose, if you're the first one in your category to come up with a purposeful brand, you might have succeeded because you would stand out, you would offer something that no one else in the category did. 15 of your competitors do the same, then you lose any form of differentiation or appeal, right? And then a parallel to that is, I always think, You have so many agencies that tell you, we're going to start by identifying your purpose. That for me, when I hear that, it's a knockout criteria already to work with an agency like that, because for me, that's lazy strategy. You and I could develop a purpose statement, so a strategic statement for every single category out there in 15 seconds. And we're probably all going to end up with make people happier, make the world a better place, and all these generic statements. But what most brands tend to forget is people do not buy any longer based on these lofty claims. People want to know, what do you have for me? And then how do you help the world? But most people forget that what is in for me first before I look at, helping or doing good in the world. So there's a lot of abuse that took place with the brand purpose, brands and campaigns. But I think it's slowly sorting itself out already. It's like the Darwinism of brand purpose, so to say.
I have a fun question here. So which industries do you think are just way too cynical for purpose-first marketing where no amount of messaging can outweigh consumer skepticism? Thinking like assassins.
Well, for me, it's literally every single category that damages the environment and the world.
I'm just thinking BP. Remember British Petroleum? They tried a purpose-built campaign for a while.
Yeah.
Right after the spill.
So those are the obvious one, right? All the utility energy companies. For me, like bottled water, it's an absolute joke because they created the problem. And, sometimes I saw like a couple of years ago, a brand manager I was following that was working for one of the big bottled company that was like claiming on LinkedIn, hooray, we found a way to have biodegradable caps on our plastic bottles.
Right.
We are doing something for the environment. And I was too polite and respond to that comment. It's like, but when
just drink it from a fountain.
That's right. And you created the problem in the first place, your company or your category. And frankly, having a cap in a plastic bottle with like 20% biodegradable ingredients is not really doing anything for the environment,
We're really going after water companies. So I think about Fiji.
Yes,
like
true.
Fiji is like this great, it's actually really good, tasty water. But the downside is, and I think it actually hurt their brand, is when people realized that they were stealing the water from the natives to give to us.
But that's another good point you make indirectly about brands and brand associations. As soon as you are thinking about your brand rationally, you find easily negative reasons for not buying the brand, right? When you think about Fiji, you think about islands, great lifestyle, that must taste good. And so when you think about the rational side of it, you're like having barriers that come up in your brain. And that's the power of strong brand too, is they elicit an emotional response that basically shuts off your rational, critical, analytical brain when choosing it, basically.
Going back to like Liquid Death, it hits me like, it'd be so easy for someone to create a Liquid Death negative campaign and make fun of them and just pull away all their power from them.
Absolutely.
People suddenly be like, oh, this is hilarious. It's kind of like what, and I try not to bring politics in, but I'm trying to think of like what the governor of California is doing right now with Donald Trump. And the reason I don't do politics is YouTube then flags it as political. But yeah, so it just hit me like, yeah, he's doing that. He's taking Trump's brand and making fun of it in a lighthearted way, but it's actually working because now every time Trump does something, people kind of laugh and go, oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's not serious.
Absolutely. And they don't think about the rationale behind it. I mentioned in my book, in my newest book, the case study of McDonald's in the US, right? So
of what?
Of McDonald's in the US.
Oh, McDonald's, right.
McDonald's a few years back were struggling because, they had sexual harassment lawsuits, increased concern about the obesity they were contributing to the quality of their...
And the pink slime. I remember that.
Yeah, the pink slime.
Everyone was talking about the pink slime for a while.
Chicken nuggets, correctly. And so they overcame all that. So it's interesting, right? So there are two cases. One is Canada and one is... the US. In Canada, the requirements to the quality of a food of a McDonald's are significantly higher than here in the US. So basically...
Yeah, it couldn't get any lower, so yeah.
That's true. But in Canada, a Big Mac is actually of a healthier quality than in the US. So
interesting.
In Canada, they had the same concerns towards fast food. So in Canada, they made a campaign, which I forgot the name of it, but it was basically about transparency. Ask me the questions and share with me the worries you have about the quality of our food, and I'm going to give you a rational explanation of why that is. So they really broke it down rationally and say, you think we're unhealthy, but now look at our nutritional value and all this kind of thing. In the US, you can't do that because, as you said, they were like at the bottom of the nutritional food chain. What they did is to reignite the energy and passion around McDonald's is they reminded everyone. So they came across this insight that basically said, we all have our specific order at McDonald's. Let's face it. First, we've all been to McDonald's and we all have our preferred order. Reminding people of that simple, what you called earlier, ritual or habit, recreated or reactivated this emotional bond people have with McDonald's. Oh yeah, I have the Big Mac. When I travel, I have a Big Mac, 2 cheeseburgers, and a milkshake. When I go to a restaurant itself, I never have a milkshake. So those are like the little quirks that everyone has. And just reminding them of their rituals and habits with McDonald's, which is a purely emotional play, was a great way to revive the brand in the US. Wouldn't have worked in Canada, and the Canadian approach couldn't have worked in the US. So it's interesting how you have here the same brand addressing a perception problem from 2 different angles based on what they could actually claim.
So again, moving on, modern marketing is split into 2 different religions: brand building monks preaching patience and performance mercenaries demanding clicks by sundown. Where have you actually seen brand first thinking lower acquisition costs or stabilize our ROAS, and how do you prove it to the spreadsheet fundamentalists?
So I don't, so that's an interesting subject. I know there's a lot of discussion. To be honest, I'm not very deep into that discussion, but I just know from research that came up a few years back that to build a brand, the best combination is a combination of brand building activities and performance building activity or performance driven activities. So the discussion for me, what I've learned is not it's an either or, is how do I combine the 2 in the most effective way? And there was a long analysis that has been done about this by two gentlemen called Les Binet and Peter Thiel. And they came up with this formula of 60-40. So like the best combination to build equity and the business over time is 60% brand building activities and 40% performance-driven activities. Now, this is an aggregate average that changes a little bit with each category, but what they're clearly able to demonstrate is that a combination of both is the most successful formula than one versus the other. So that's the extent to which I can talk to the subject simply based on the data that is available out there. I don't do much media, to be honest, or media spending analysis for my clients. So my level of I don't want to pretend I'm an expert in that field.
All right, so then we're gonna strand you on a desert island.
Mm-hmm.
You are allowed to bring 5 people. Who are they?
So that's a great question too. So the 5 people I would bring is Luke Nichols. I don't know if you're familiar with. He has an extremely popular YouTube channel called The Outdoor Boys, and I think he stopped it now. So basically, the dude goes into nature, into the frozen Montana landscape, and builds an igloo and gives like a survival show, basically, but done very genuinely, very likable. He has millions of followers on YouTube. So I take him because he would know how to build a shelter and make sure we don't die on day 1, basically. But then I added people like Gordon Ramsay. I would have preferred Anthony Bourdain, obviously, but someone who can turn.
He's kind of not with us.
I know, but so basically, who can take.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I used to have dinner with him all the time because
really?
His steakhouse was on Broadway, and when it closed down, he would go to a little restaurant called Veritas.
Nice.
And it was on 22nd and Broadway. So about 11 o'clock, I'd be at the bar, and he'd come and get dinner there, sit down, and start talking to everybody. All the chefs would show up to Veritas. He actually wrote in his book that it was probably the perfect restaurant.
I love it. Now, that is a proof of quality, right? If Bourdain and the surrounding chefs go there and have their after late night dinner, you know that.
Yeah, and they shut down the restaurant because the chef wanted to start traveling the world.
Yeah, that's
a different chef. And I don't think the guy ever got back. Veritas had like the largest wine collection. They would sell it at price. It was pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
Years ago, yeah. They made it because they didn't want to be a 5-star restaurant. They wanted to be a 4-star restaurant because they said 5 stars is not perfect. 4 stars is perfect.
Quite an experience or memory you have there because the dude is a legend, right? So I would take him. I would take Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, probably.
That's a diverse Bill Maher and Joe Rogan opposite. You just have them to argue? Is that it?
It's interesting conversations in the evening, interesting perspective on things and interesting conversations. And keep yourself entertained. I think you get pretty bored on a deserted island. Once you have provided your shelter and your food, you got to do stuff, right? So that's why
Who
I
gets
would bring
voted
that
off
in.
first when they can't take him anymore? You know
I
it's
don't
Gordon
think.
Ramsay.
Yeah, probably. Because
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay for me would be, you know the value of people, or you discover the quality of a person under stress,
Yeah,
under
I think he'd have a
duress.
problem with it. Even the coconuts wouldn't be simple enough or something.
I think so too.
You have
So I
too many
think
variety of coconuts or
that's
something.
right. He'd freak out or something like. Oh, he
Your
wouldn't have
menu is
enough
too
people
complex.
to yell at, to be angry
Coconuts
at.
and sand. Who would you grab first? What job would you grab first? Chief fisherman, camp strategist, or cultural anthropologist of coconuts?
So I'm not sure what the name of the role would be, but when I think about my youth is I used to play soccer like every European, right? And my strength was always to be on the field and to identify the gaps in the play.
Yeah,
So
Europeans like to pass the ball.
that's right. Well, we like to pass the ball, but I
Brazilians
was
like to show off.
yeah, and fall and especially if there are girls around to fall dramatically and claim pain but then get themselves together back onto the field and try to score the next goal. But I was always great at I was fast at running fast, but I was always great at identifying where the gaps, where is my team not positioned, where is the gap in the adversary team, and then put myself there. So I don't know how you would describe that, but it's basically compensate and try to see what is missing in the team, what are we not doing that we need to do to be able to survive on this island, and then fulfill that role on an ongoing basis, so to say. So compensate for other people's for the team's gaps. That's the role I would play.
So would you control the resources? Something like first the trousers, then the tarp?
No, but I would prioritize what we need, and that would be first the tarp, then the coconut, and then the conversation on the coconut and the fire, because you got to cook that coconut, and then the conversation. So I would still try to prioritize by importance of surviving.
So which island mate ends up being the most useful after the first week, and why?
I think it'd be the first one, Luke Nichols, simply because of his experience and his broad range of experience. I think to come back to Gordon Ramsay, if we only have coconuts for dinner and for lunch and for breakfast, I think that get boring pretty quickly. Eventually, probably Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, maybe after 3 or 4 weeks of ongoing debate every single night, is something you would want to avoid or stay away from, or at least take a break from. So I'd stay with Luke Nichols.
So reading the notes, you said your dream power, and I like this a lot, because I live in Arizona, is penalizing bad drivers. And Arizona are gifting critical thinking, also an issue in Arizona. What blind spots have you had to ticket in your own career, and how do you keep your own BS detector sharp in an industry drowning in jargon and hype?
That's a difficult question, right? So one thing I've learned over the year is your ego takes a beating, right? All of a sudden you realize the world is not about you any longer. You can go and drink out. If you have small kids, you can go and drink out once and up until midnight and wake up the next morning with a headache. But your kid is going to be up at 6 o'clock, wants your attention, wants to be fed, whether you have a hangover or not. So I've learned through my children that ego takes a step back. But I've also learned that the best thing when you go to work is to leave your ego at home. I think the biggest causes of problems in a work environment are driven by egos. My idea is better, or I feel threatened because, you seem to know what you're doing, so I'm going to intervene. If you leave the ego out and focus just on the thinking and the ideas and the processes to get to these ideas, you take away a lot of the needs that your ego has that needs to be fed. And that can be as much as, not to go too metaphysical here, but I have a firm belief that people have lost a sense of authority. People don't believe in religion anymore as they used to. People don't trust their government as they used to. So there's a big gap that has been created. And what I see, especially with a lot of young professionals, is they bring their value system to work, right? And they want to do something bigger. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger to fill this sort of like gap at work. But then if I come back to my water bottle, sorry, but if you're selling water bottles or if you're selling oil, I don't care how much you want to save the world, you are in the wrong business or in the wrong category to do so. So don't try to explain to me that, you have a purpose-driven approach because you want to do something meaningful. I think all that is, for me, driven by the ego and the need to believe into something. Leave that at home. takes away 90% of the work-related problems if you're able to do that. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Can you tell me a time that humor saved a tense room? Or do Germans just not have a sense of humor?
That's the biggest misconception in the history of the world. I would say that Germans have no sense of humor. They have a fantastic sense of humor. I think it's just the other nations don't understand it. We think we're hilarious. My kids would disagree with that, but we think we're hilarious. I don't know if it was, I think technically is when you have a meeting and you have a process you go through with the client is you try to keep the mood lighthearted and relaxed and collaborative and all these things, right? So you always try to bring that. One case, I did a global workshop with German engineers for a global medical supply company. And this was the worst workshop I've ever participated in because instead of coming up with ideas, people would always question each other. Like, okay, it's beautiful outside. Why don't we take a break? Well, I mean, is it really beautiful outside? Let me check the temperature and see what the weather forecast is. They would destroy every form of trying to fuel creative thinking. And it was so bad that it was a workshop that I did in Germany. It was so bad that I was sitting at the bar after the first day of workshop, completely depressed, drinking beer after beer, and thinking like, I might not go into the second day of the workshop. I might just change my flight back to the US and take the 6 a.m. flight back. But then I got over it and all that stuff, reorganized my thinking and my approach. And then the first thing I did in the morning is to tell all these engineers, so first of all, we're going to shut up, all of us. We're not going to talk. We're not going to have any side conversation. And number two, let me tell you a joke. So I told them a very dirty joke, which I could never have told in the US. I would have been kicked out of the country probably. But that made them realize the role they were playing. So it was a dirty joke with a purpose. But that made them realize what they were doing wrong and made everyone laugh and slap their thighs and stuff like that. And that together with the no speaking rule allowed us then to move forward into the process and come up with a successful outcome. But as I said, that was probably the only occasion I would have dared telling a dirty joke to a bunch of German engineers to break the ice or to get them out of their own shell, if that makes sense.
So, who is your real life Yoda, and what line of theirs still whispers in your head when a meeting turns chaotic?
So, my newest book, the Science of Brand Association, is a curation of best-in-class thinking in terms of brand building, in terms of evidence-based marketing. And I would say all the people...
Did you have a copy with you?
I have a copy somewhere. And I would say, see how well I'm prepared? Give me 1 second.
You got a bunch of the same book behind you, though. A white book. I don't know what that is. Is that your other book?
It's like subliminal messaging. But yeah, this is basically the book. There's a non-sellable version, but it's basically the book came out 3 weeks ago. And what this is really is, it's a curation of science-based evidence and data-driven evidence or evidence-based marketing principles to identify what allows brands to, how do you define brands, how do you build brands, how do you grow brands. And in my introduction, I dedicate this book to all the marketing giants mentioned in this book that made this book possible, the guys. And it's people like from the Herrenberg Bass Institute, it's Mark Ritson, it's professors here in American University. It's a whole bunch of people. I take the Japanese approach after World War II. Japan after World War II was always, they would steal technology, they would steal manufacturing processes, integrate them, and then...
The Germans did that really well also.
Did they? I think they came up with...
Yeah, the Germans are known for being really good currently at industrial espionage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Espionage, I didn't know that. So maybe they took a chapter from the Japanese playbook. But I'm not surprised you're saying that because Japan and Germany always have a very strong connection. And
sometimes not so good, but yeah.
Sometimes not so good, but the outcome may not be that good.
And they both make the best scissors for, strangely enough, Japan and Germany makes the...
Interesting.
If you're a stylist, you want to get scissors from either Japan or Germany.
And I'm sure they stole the initial way of doing scissors from someone else and then perfected it and made it better and improved it to get where they are today. So that was Japan's strategy after World War II. I'm not going to say anything about Germany. Yeah, same. Copy first and then improve. And
first they were like the worst cars, and then... People
And
even
they
thought,
became,
used to think
now
of a
they're
Japanese car, you thought of a junk car, and now suddenly they're the better cars.
now it's a gold standard in reliability and resale value and stuff like that. So I, I'd like
Like
to
the
look at,
Toyota, I think it's like the Corolla or something. It's like the Camry, one of them, right?
yeah, it's crazy, right? So that's the way I look at it too. It's like learn from everyone, take the best of everyone, and then try to create your own sauce and mixture and try to do something hopefully even better out of that.
So, multiple choice question again. What career regret would you warn a 25-year-old strategist about? A, worshiping templates. B, mistaking slides for strategy. C, optimizing banners like it's a calling. Or D, all of the above, go talk to real people.
The latter, all of the above. So literally, I decided to leave advertising and start my own business when I was sitting in a meeting with 6 people on our side, 5 people on the client side, discussing for 1 hour the creative qualities of an online banner. And after that meeting, I was like, I can't do that shit anymore. That is so insignificant. That's not what I want to do out of my life. But I think it's all of the above. And I would add number 4 or number 5, I guess, leave the ego at home. It's a job. It's not your life calling. It's not anything beyond a job.
Someone give you a magical wand. You can fine the industry for one bad habit and gift everyone one good habit. Who gets fined and who gets funded?
Funded, critical thinking, evidence-based marketing principles, find everyone else. So I did recently an analysis of some of the most popular marketing books out there. And what's really interesting is that only very, very few books out there, and books as a way to show marketing philosophy or marketing knowledge that then gets applied by so many marketers out there. Like, Start with the Why. Highly successful book. Everyone wanted it. Everyone wanted to apply it. There is no evidence to support any of the claims made in the book. And the number of books that are actually evidence-based and applicable can be boiled down to 5, 6, 7 books at the most out of the hundreds of marketing books out there. So my mind has changed. It's like focus on the evidence or trying to find as close as possible to the evidence as you can go and leave aside everyone else.
So, last question. If you could go back in time and tell young Ulli one thing about the industry, what would it be?
Ideas are everything. So the quality of your thinking and the quality of the creative thinking is what drives everything. Everything around that is distraction, is BS, is politics, it's ego, is all these kind of things. Focus on the thinking and focus on producing good thinking, substantial thinking. That is what implies don't follow all the trends, don't run like with the herd, and don't be like everyone else. Focus on coming up with good ideas, whether they're strategic or creative, and that's the part that's going to drive you in your career. That's what I would did it to some extent, but I would have started earlier if I would have noticed. So that's the advice I would have given.
And now the hard part is where we force everyone to dance.
Oh,
Thank you, Ulli Appelbaum. You taught us that branding isn't decoration, it's neurosurgery with a side of wit, that Febreze sells the smell of done, and that a female fighter pilot can rescue frozen pizza sales better than any CMO with a spreadsheet. And a big thank you to our sponsors, Troutman Armin, the lawyers who make sure ad tech innovation doesn't end in subpoenas, and incremental.com. Because if you can't measure what's working, you're basically marketing in the dark. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.